there was one surprise, right? Like we knew based upon a vote that took place, I guess it was a week and a half ago now. Time has flattened for me. Rand Paul basically introduced a motion to summarily dismiss the case because ostensibly there was no constitutional grounding for impeaching a former president. At that time, 5 Republicans voted against Rand Paul. All you really didn't need any, right? It's 51 vote. The vice president could have voted. This time, they basically took the same vote, but it was 56. Or I should say there was one more Republican who voted in favor of the idea that it's constitutional to try a president who's been impeached.
Yeah, and
or a former president.
Well, it was Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, and his reasoning was basically Trump's lawyers are so bad that they're forcing me to vote that this is a legitimate constitutional trial. Doubt he will actually vote to convict, but that's just a little preview of how horrific Trump's lawyers' performances were yesterday.
It was stunning, to say the least. And on some level, not surprising. I mean, he fired his first set of lawyers a couple of weeks ago. And then, I mean, everybody's been in this predicament, right? Like, you've got maybe your tub is backed up. And so you call a plumber, but the plumber calls and says, I've got mono. I've got mononuclear. I can't come.
Right.
Do you know another plumber? I don't really. Well, let me call. I'm going to call my cousin and see. And they just go, oh yeah, no, I've done some plumbing. And then they come over, and that's what happens.
Well, I mean, one of the people on this team was a personal injury attorney who has sued him in the past year. So that's just the kind of folk that Trump had to resort to.
Team of rivals.
Exactly. But here, so look, there's a lot of footage we could show you, and we're going to play that clip from Cassidy later, but there's a lot of footage I could show you to explicate just how bad Trump's, never mind the case in and of itself, which I think is a pretty weak case, but just how bad his attorneys are. But we've settled on 2. And the first one, they're both from Sean Hannity's show. And Sean Hannity is interviewing one of the attorneys on the team, not the worst one. Although that attorney seems to like they're almost like in a race to see who can do a worse job. They are talking about Bruce Castor. And Hannity is begging this guy to fire Bruce Castor because of how poorly he did. Here's Sean Hannity with David Schoen.
To drain the swamp, whatever they call it on his side, to make a difference in this country. That's what political speech is about.
There's a lot of criticism of the opening, not your part in particular, but it seemed to be free associating, extemporaneous, somewhat meandering. Will the rest of this process, because you're going to be out, as I understand it, Friday and Saturday, will this be more focused and will it be more prepared? And are there other people that are planning to make those arguments? Because some conservatives called me and said, whoa, we need somebody harder hitting here.
Well, the fellow who you say did the opening today has his law firm there. There seem to be very capable people. I'm sure today he hadn't planned on going. And so I'm sure that they'll be very well prepared in the future and do a great job in the case. There's a lot to say, and I know they feel very strongly about fighting against what they're seeing.
All right, David, good job today. Thank you so much.
I'll tell you something. First off, he doesn't even say his name, like as if, like, to be honest with you, I wasn't even familiar with him.
Yeah.
Did they just admit that their lawyer didn't realize that he was going to be speaking today? That doesn't seem like they've prepped very well. It really does have that sense of like, I know a guy, he's not quite licensed, but he could come over and fix your
he does a little bit of everything.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's plumbing, right? Yeah, well, I mean, he does electrical sometimes, but I'm sure it can't. How different can it be?
It's all stuff within the walls.
So that gives you a sense of just how bad everybody, and what they're trying to do, of course, is set this up of like, oh, it's not Trump's fault. Trump has a great case. It's just they don't have a good lawyer. But then watch what the good lawyer David Schoen does afterwards. Remember, the case is, did what Donald Trump say incite his supporters? Right? That's the case. And here is David Schoen maybe accidentally making the case that, yes, he did.
Have to say they deserve impeachment.
Yeah, I would say if listen, if they tried to impeach them, I would say that also was an abuse of the impeachment process. But your point is they're using rhetoric that's just as inflammatory or more so.
I'm sorry. The point here is they are now trying to make the argument that Democrats have said just as inciting things as Donald Trump did in that speech leading people in. So here.
Was an abuse of the impeachment process. But your point is they're using rhetoric that's just as inflammatory or more so. The problem is they don't really have followers. They're dedicated followers. And so, when they give their speeches. But this speech, I think right now you really are finding out about the pre-planning. And I'm afraid they're going to back off that investigation because maybe, so many people want to tie it to Donald Trump. There's nothing they showed today that in any way ties this to Donald Trump. It's just a silly argument. It's not tied to Donald Trump.
Okay. Now, did you catch what he said there? Democrats have said the exact same thing. It's just the problem is they don't have those type of dedicated followers.
They don't lead a cult of personality, and that's on them.
But what does he mean by the problem? What he means by the problem is their failure to incite their followers to go commit an act of violence like this is because they haven't really done the work and laid the ground to have the proper followers. When he says the problem, he is saying the reason why other people haven't done this. And what is the this? The this is incite other people to violence. Look, the bottom line is I can take a match and I can drop it in a bucket of water and nothing happens. But if I take a match and I decide to drop it in a bucket of kerosene, and that's what Donald Trump did. For years, he has been basically filling that bucket with kerosene, creating the fumes. I know it's not a perfect analogy.
All right.
And he lit the match and threw it into that kerosene. He knew what he was doing. Everybody else did. And there's his attorney just basically admitting it.
Yeah, I mean, there's two prongs of what they're trying to argue, and they're doing it pretty poorly. One is that he didn't incite it, which his lawyer just admitted to, basically tacitly on Sean Hannity's program. And the second is that you can't impeach him when he's not in office, which, as Jamie Raskin and the Democrats have pointed out, is patently absurd because it sets a precedent that a president can do whatever they want in January, do whatever they want in the final weeks of their presidency, and there are zero consequences. The case is insanely weak, but Trump will still get off because of the partisan nature of all of this.
That's true. But that first part that you're talking about in terms of whether he can be impeached has already been adjudicated essentially by this jury. And that was yesterday. And today it'll be interesting to see if we see Castor. I suspect we may not.
I mean, this might have been a plea to get him fired. Sean Hannity trying to communicate with him via the TV, as he so often tries to do.
It was reported that Donald Trump was rather unhappy with Castor's performance.